Browns losers in their final preseason game to the Seahawks. But of course, that's not really the story here. We're going to start with Deshaun Watson, Dan Labbe, Mary Kay Cabot, Ashley Bastock. So, Mary Kay, you flew all the way out to Seattle to watch Jameis Winston start in place of Deshaun Watson. We kind of sensed that this was coming, but kind of walk us through the Deshaun Watson situation, what Kevin had to say after, and the decision not to play Deshaun tonight or on Saturday night against the Seahawks.
Well, he noted that it wasn't just because of the offensive line, but because of other players that were not playing in this game. And we know Amari didn't play and Jerry Jeudy didn't play. David Njoku, who also helps out a lot with blocking. So this was a game, it just wasn't going to be conducive to Deshaun getting out there and playing for the first time since he suffered that fractured shoulder in November or whenever he suffered the fractured shoulder, but the first time since he last played in November. So it wasn't just about the fact that Jermaine Afidi was starting at left tackle. It was everything that went into the hopper, plus a little bit of that soreness on Wednesday. But I did ask Kevin about that soreness, and he said he's totally fine. We know that it really wasn't as much about that as it was about the protection issues and all of the other things going on around him.
Ashley, this is something we had been talking about. We, of course, watched practice the other day when Jameis Winston, that was the day Deshaun sort of was taken out of practice. We saw Jameis go through a lot of the scout team reps. That's when we started to really get the sense that maybe Deshaun Watson wouldn't start this game. And it ultimately just made sense, especially when the Browns before the game put out that gigantic list of players that were not going to play.
Yeah, my first thought was I know we call this the dress rehearsal game, but can this still be considered a dress rehearsal game when there's like 20, 30 guys who a lot of them are your top key guys for the season that are not playing in this? And we know they've typically played it safe, even though this is the dress rehearsal game, quote unquote. In years past, some of your top guys like your Joel Bitonio's, your Nick Chubb's, your Myles Garrett's, haven't played in this game. And, I thought it was interesting. We heard from Andrew Berry on the pregame show on Channel 5. Obviously, Kevin Stefanski talked about it as well. But this idea that it just seems like the Browns are really relying on the work that Deshaun Watson has done in training camp, the reps he got in those joint practices. And I'm all for an idea you threw out earlier in one of our podcasts, I think, Mary Kay, about maybe this upcoming week we'll see them. I wouldn't be surprised if they decide to go and practice down at the stadium and even work on operational stuff that way. I think that would be another great resource that they have available without having had to worry about playing him in this game on Saturday.
So before we move on to the rest of the game, I'll ask you, Mary Kay, do you feel good about where Deshaun Watson is at as we are now getting into the real thing?
Here's the thing, and I talked to a number of guys in the locker room about this after the game. They haven't all been together as an offense. They just really haven't. So I haven't seen it yet. I feel good about the talent they have coming back to the football team on Tuesday. I think there's going to be a massive influx of players that are going to rejoin the team, guys that are going to be coming off of those injury lists, some offensive linemen that are going to be coming back, some tackles that are going to be coming back. So I feel good about the fact that there's going to be way more talent than what we've seen so far. But I do wonder if they can pull it together as quickly as they need to. That would be the concern here.
And Ashley, again, before we move on, I'll ask you the same question. I know I kind of agree with Mary Kay here. I think on paper, I feel okay about everything. We just haven't seen it yet, so it's hard to really feel good about it. Where do you stand on sort of where this offense and Deshaun Watson is?
Yeah, that's where I am too. And I think where the worry comes in is the fact that so much of this is new, obviously, right? It's not stuff they ran last year. Now, I think the few things working in their favor, even though they haven't gotten to put all the pieces together, is two of the main guys in this. Obviously, one being Deshaun Watson and another being Jerry Jeudy, who's the new receiver. They are not totally unfamiliar with these choice routes, and especially Deshaun having run a very similar offense when he was in Houston. This is kind of second nature to him, a lot of this. And Jerry Jeudy said just last week, I've been running choice routes my whole life. It's something he loves to do. The Browns obviously went out and got him because he's the featured choice route guy. But I will say I'm just nervous having not seen it all put together yet. And also looking at what's happening in this running back room right now is something that's also making me a bit nervous, knowing all the injuries that are right there currently, and even wondering if some protection issues might kind of transcend beyond just the offensive line because of how much they rely on those guys in pass blocking.
Okay, if there was a star of this game, Mary Kay, it was probably Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He solidified his roster spot. I think it's safe to say Saturday night against the Seahawks. What did you see out of DTR in this game?
Yeah, I ended up writing my whole story about DTR, my early gamer about DTR, because I think that not only did he solidify his roster spot, even though Snoop went out and, of course, threw 3 touchdown passes after I had this thing all written, but not only did he solidify that roster spot, I also think that he had to give them something to think about in terms of even the backup job. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen right away, but I think that it could trend that way if he continues on like this. And that is because he has a knack for going in there and putting points on the board and providing this team with the spark. And I think you can see that his arm is very good, very strong. He's got the mobility that they love. And there are just so many things about Dorian Thompson-Robinson from a trait standpoint that I think that, we could end up hearing some of this as time goes on. Geez, if we had to put somebody else into the football game, who would it be? And again, I'm sure in the early going, it will probably still be Jameis, but I think that Dorian is making a strong case for himself in that way.
Okay, I think that's spicy, and I think I disagree, but that's probably for another time for us to really kind of hash that out as far as DTR as the number two. But Ashley, DTR, I mean, he really has been one of the best, probably the best quarterback or the most consistent quarterback going back to the beginning of camp. And I think he put an exclamation point on that tonight.
Yeah, I'm just, I think, so impressed with how much more sure of himself he looks. I mean, obviously, you think about some of his worst moments from the 2023 regular season when he just looked totally overwhelmed at times, like in that Baltimore game, and couldn't move the ball down the field. Now, obviously, the preseason still much different than the regular season, but I do think with these younger players, and we've seen him do this throughout all of camp against this Browns defense too, just make these really great throws that are placed really well. His timing is really great. I thought you saw it even on that throw he had to Jalen Darden today, where it was they had the completion and then Jalen Darden was in the end zone. He couldn't corral the ball in, but it was a perfectly placed ball, I thought, by Dorian right over the Seattle defender. So you're seeing him, I think, just look more sure of himself. He's looked like that all of camp, just on time, on target with these throws. And he definitely, I think, has come a long way, especially knowing what that hip injury did to him, how hard he had to work to come back from that, and knowing where he was less than a year ago in terms of his understanding of being an NFL quarterback. I think he's really made a case for himself so far.
Okay, let's wrap this with some news from this game. Dante Foreman left the game with a rib injury. That's now two backs, Pierre Strong and Dante Foreman, who are dealing with rib injuries going into what is essentially the start of the regular season here. And Justin Hardy also suffered a concussion. Of course, he's a key special teams guy as well. So we've got to keep an eye on that, Mary Kay. This running back room is starting to become a little bit of last man standing right now.
Yeah, I think if Pierre Strong can come back from his rib injury this week, and if Dante is not too badly hurt, they should be okay. In the event that they need to go out and find themselves another running back, maybe they keep Aiden Robbins on the roster for a little while, or go look outside for another running back. But I think they should be okay. In fact, I asked Kevin about that after the game, and he also said that they should be okay.
Yeah, the good news is with rib injuries, we do see guys at least play through that. It could cause problems with ball security, things like that. But Ashley, at least, especially if they aren't fractured ribs, you'd think that at least one of these guys can get back on the field by September 8th.
Yeah, you would hope so because again, it's not like they have to go out and play the Cowboys next Sunday, right? They all obviously get a weekend off here before that week one game, but yeah, I mean it is tricky I think with rib injuries. You hope it's a quick recovery because those can be painful. We talked about that last week, even if it's not a broken rib. And again, I think the protection issues right now for this team, protecting Deshaun Watson, protecting your quarterback, all the work the running backs have to do there is almost as important as them running the football for this team right now. So definitely, I think a tough blow for that room to lose Dante again, because obviously he suffered that scary injury at the Greenbrier too. But if one of those guys at least can come back, that helps your depth a lot.
Okay, the next steps here are roster cuts by Tuesday at 4 p.m. Then it is on to the Dallas Cowboys week 1. If you're listening to this on the Orange and Brown Talk feed, the audio of this, I know it was quick. We'll be back with a more in-depth pod here in the next day or two, but we appreciate you listening to this. If you're watching the video, the next time you see us, we will be back out in Berea. We'll probably have some roster cuts to talk about. And then, of course, the next time you see us in a stadium, it'll be week 1 against the Dallas Cowboys. For full coverage of this game and more, roster cuts, everything, it's all at cleveland.com/Browns.